Reddit, what are some of your stories about you cheating and the repercussions it brought? This guy I knew had a girlfriend, with also a younger sister. At night, he basically sneaked out of his GF room to get to her sister's room and bang her. The sisters never told anyone, and he broke up because he wasn't feeling it. The ex-GF still doesn't know 6 years later, found out that she was going on a date with a guy from her office. She thought I was working that night. Instead, I followed her to the bar and waited in the parking lot. I see her pull up and walk into the bar. I could see through the window and saw him pay, and they both get up and go to his car. I follow them to a no-tell motel. They go into a street-level room. The motel rooms are individual units looking out onto the street. I give them 10 minutes to get naked, then I rap at the door. "Open up, police." He comes to the door, in a towel. I cold cock him, yank the towel, and leave him lying naked and unconscious in the middle of the parking lot. I then grab her. She has the idiotic idea to say, "This isn't what it looks like." I grab the room key and lock them out. She is going crazy trying to cover up and screaming at me to help her. I say okay and call her mother to come pick her up. She overhears me telling Mom that I just caught her fucking some lowlife from work and I will be filing for divorce on Monday. I get in my car, go to the motel office, and tell them I will be mailing them the key. I warn them not to let her back in the room, as the credit card she used is now listed as stolen. The motel people say they will be calling police. I hope her mom got there before the cops. I had just started a new job and was sitting in the office to finish up some paperwork with my supervisor. As we're talking about things, a guy walks in looking sheepish. Our supervisor asks him where he's been. He hadn't come into work for 3 days. This launched my new coworker into the craziest story. He started off by saying he was in the town of Hazard, taking care of his mom. So if you're from Kentucky, a little town up in the mountains called Hazard has a bit of a reputation. That was my first clue that this was not going to end well. So his mom, she abruptly wanted a divorce and had just attempted suicide. See, that would have been enough, Absence explained, but this dude proceeded to tell the whole story. His parents had been happily married for a couple decades, which is why she was so completely blindsided. His mom had picked up the house phone and overheard her husband in the middle of phone sex with his sister. When confronted, he admitted it had started when they were teenagers and they wanted to be together. So she now had to face the fact that for their entire marriage, her husband had been cheating with his own sister. My ex-girlfriend had a friend that had this happen. This was in a large multi-building housing complex in Central Europe. Her husband had to go away on business and was to be gone for a week. One night after midnight, she hears the door open and in walks her husband with an empty trash can and wearing his slippers. No suitcase. Turns out, he did not go away, but was seeing a woman in the same complex. He had a few drinks, was tired, took out the garbage, and, in his fog, returned to his own apartment and blew his own cover. They divorced. Back in the mid-'80s, I worked with a salesman, Stan. Stan was married to his high school sweetheart. They were from eastern Kentucky, and her family was pretty big in the coal industry, so they were pretty well off. During general office chat, he mentioned his wife Laura several times and had a photo of a pretty blonde on his desk. One day, close to lunchtime, the pretty blonde from the photo came in. When I encountered her, she introduced herself as Jan and said she was there to see Stan. He came out of his office and greeted her affectionately, and they left. I was a little confused and said to a nearby coworker, "I thought he said his wife's name was Laura." The coworker replied, "His wife is Laura, Jan is his girlfriend." Turns out that Stan had met Jan several years before when he managed a fast food restaurant she worked at when she was 15 and he was 26. They started their affair shortly after. Apparently, her parents had no problem with the situation. Her room was where they had sex most often. Then one day it came up in conversation that he had taken her to her senior prom a couple of years earlier. He was driving a cab at the time and simply told his wife he was working an extra night shift. Then he went to his girlfriend's house and got dressed up and he took her to her prom and they partied the night away in a hotel room after. His wife would drive home and spend the weekend with her parents every few weeks. Occasionally he'd go with her, but most often he'd give some excuse as to why he couldn't go, and then his girlfriend would come over and play house for the weekend. Only time I've ever been disloyal was in a 5-year relationship with a remarkably sweet yet ridiculously jealous, insecure girl. She started getting very controlling, and the minute anyone in my life seems like an authority figure to me, I end up rebelling. I was banned from watching porn eventually, and that's kind of the breaking point. I'd really get off on jacking off to pictures of her best friends on FB. I was waging my own little guerrilla war. I can't watch porn? Well, then I'll fantasize about your fully clothed friends. Bitch, you can't control me. Then after 4 years, she left me a note saying that I don't make her happy anymore. And she was done. I was heartbroken. I was betrayed. And like a dumbass, I took her back. But just could never really trust her or forgive her. Then I started getting girls to send me nude pics. I honestly did it out of 75% anger and 25% because I like to feel desired again, like I was good enough for someone. I got so many titty pics. One girl sent me a fuck ton of pics in lingerie, poses that I requested, etc. She was apeshit about me. Acted like I was a god among men, while my girlfriend was making me feel like I was about 2 inches tall. This new girl kept requesting that we meet up, and I kept saying no, because I'd never physically cheat like that. Well, this new girl got mad and decided to save all the pics we had exchanged and the convos we had and sent them to my GF. That was the end of that. This was about 4 years ago. I was dating this guy, and we had a really fucked up relationship. We would both be emotionally abusive to each other but couldn't live without each other. Or so it seems. I was working at a restaurant at the time, and everyone would just get absolutely completely trashed while at work. The manager there was a few years older than me and attractive and would always flirt with me. I would flirt back, but nothing crossing the line. One day he called me into his office, and as soon as he shut the door, he just started kissing me like crazy. He bent me over his desk and fucked the shit out of me. I never thought that situations like that actually happened, but there I was, getting pounded by my boss. Not one of my proud moments, but you live and learn, right? Repercussions. A month or two after this affair, we get found out, and he breaks up with me only to beg to be back with me a few months later. Also, he became completely prejudiced against black people, me being a white girl, and my boss was black. Every time we would get into a fight, he would call me a nigger lover. Glad to be out of that one. I hang out with a group of men that all knew each other from college. I married one of these friends and so got brought into the fold. I was the only wife, girlfriend, a lady ever really around, because these are all geeky guys. They aren't totally socially inept, but it's pretty close. One had a steady fiancée, but she was a bitch and never came around. Well, after about 5 years, my marriage is getting totally stagnant. My hubby and I get along well, but by this time it's been a few years since I realized I think of him as only a great friend. Maybe it's because I have become his friend's friend, and I feel like just one of the guys most of the time. I have no physical attraction or desire for my husband. I deny this for a long time, but it's there. Enter Ernest. Ernest is another high school friend that lived away for years and years and moved home when he fell on hard times. His parents kicked him out after a year, and since we already had another of the guys living with us, it was no big deal to offer him the other spare bedroom. About a month before he is set to move in, we start to hang out more and more. Hubby and I would have the guys over to watch movies or football, but as responsible adults, everyone would be done by 10 or so. And Ernest and I would stay up later BC, neither of us had lives, and my husband would either sit at his computer and play StarCraft or whatever, leaving us primarily alone. At first it was just talking and movies. Then it was flirting and drinking. But we click really well, and since this guy is pretty much the opposite of Jake in any way, I pretty much fall head over heels. The night before he is set to move in, we get incredibly drunk, and things happen. We are obviously into each other, and dude has barely touched a boob, so he was all for it without saying he was all for it. No sex, though. We're talking total virgin. He moves in, and without ever verbally confirming anything, we both acknowledge some major shit is about to go down. Over the course of the next 10 months, we have a complete affair conducted entirely under my roof. Most of the time, it was either late at night while Jake was sleeping or while he was at work. It was so overt. It was covert. On our couch, on our bed, in the spare room, on the coffee table, in the office in front of the computer late at night while Jake was asleep across the hall. His virginity gone with the wind. My self-respect vanished completely. I'm still looking for it. There is no getting away with it. I was never caught, but I am now divorced, and my repercussions have been that it has led me down a deadly path of depression and denial. Karma. The thought of karma scares the shit out of me. Be sure to subscribe and check out the next story here.